Now we start with Moscow. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will have to like a U.S.-backed peace plan to halt Russia's invasion and ultimately approve it. Trump has also said that the approaching winter, the mounting death toll, and repeated attacks on Ukrainian energy plants underscored the urgency of ending the war. Let's listen into what President Donald Trump has shared.
I've spoken with their people. We have a plan. It's horrible what's happening. It's a war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I was president, and it's a shame. And I thought they should have acted quicker. But it's a cold winter, and a lot of the you talk about utilities, but a lot of the big energy-producing plants have been under attack. To put it mildly, to put it nicely. Yeah, we have a way of getting peace, or we think we have a way of getting peace. He's going to have to approve it. Just so sad, so many people. You know, last month they lost 25,000 soldiers. This is something, we haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials say that President Donald Trump is working with both Ukraine and Russia to end the war as quickly as possible. As Vice President J.D. Vance has also stated in a social media post that any plan to end Russia and Ukraine's war should preserve Ukrainian sovereignty and be acceptable to both countries, but that it was a fantasy to think Ukraine could win if the U.S. just gave Kyiv more money or weapons or imposed more Russian sanctions. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin says that a U.S. plan could lay the foundation for a Ukraine peace deal, confirming for the first time that Moscow had received a copy from the United States. Putin also threatened to seize more territory if Kyiv rejects the proposal, saying that the recent capture of Ukrainian city Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front line. Let's listen into what President Putin has shared.
Полагаю, что и он может быть положен в основу окончательного мирного урегулирования. Если в Киеве не хотят обсуждать предложение президента Трампа и отказываются от этого, то и они, и европейские поджигатели войны должны понимать, что события, которые произошли в Купянске, будут неизбежно повторяться и на других ключевых участках фронта.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has also responded after a phone call with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance that Ukraine would work with the United States and Europe at an advisor level to work towards a peace plan for his country's war with Russia. He has also emphasized that Ukraine has always respected and continues to respect U.S. President Donald Trump's desire to put an end to the bloodshed, and they view every realistic proposal positively. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. As you have mentioned and emphasized so many times with us and for our viewers that, this bloodshed has to come to an end. Do you think we are seeing some horizon for it, and do you think this U.S.-backed peace plan that Ukraine is expected to ultimately approve, including giving up some territory, how do you think this is going to affect the power balance between Washington, Moscow, and Kyiv?
Good morning,
Thank you.
Asoma.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me this is a very important session, let me tell you.
Yes.
And I must compliment NewsX World to have selected the theme and focusing on a discussion. In your question, there are more than two subparts, but I'll take only two important subparts. The
Yes.
two important subparts is about the peace proposal to bring this mindless conflict of Russia-Ukraine war to an end. And the second one that you indicated is about the power balance, consequent power balance. The first thing is about the peace proposal. I'm glad that the leadership role is being played by United States in a most pragmatic manner. And as it is the president of USA had made a commitment during his campaigning that he will bring the conflict to an end within 24 hours. Doesn't matter if it has not happened in 24 hours, at least he is one man who channelizing all his effort and trying to marshal support from all concerned, all relevant and irrelevant stakeholders to bring this meaningless and mindless conflict to an end. But allow me to say a couple of issues in the peace proposal. His start point is that whatever land has been occupied by Russia, that has to be foregone by Ukraine. It's a great start point. It's a very pragmatic start point because the students of history would do well if they look back to Thucydide historical works. Thucydide philosophy always said that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. It's very important to realize that Ukraine armed forces or as an economy or as a nation does not stand anywhere before the erstwhile superpower which the legacy of which has been transferred or carried forward to Russia. It doesn't stand anywhere by prolonging the conflict unnecessarily. Therefore, to bring this conflict to an end, you have to reconcile with the Thucydide, the name of the conflict, if I recall correctly, Asoma, it is Peloponnesian War, which took place and which Thucydide has referred. And there is a great debate and also a discussion on the whole issue. They come to a conclusion that in today's 21st century, the power of a country is what matters. Morality and ethics, they have no relevance. So therefore, to bring some kind of prospective progress on the issue, I think it's a great start point. Second point is about the legitimacy of Zelensky. Doesn't matter, there are so many things which have happened in the world which have been illegitimate for a larger good cause of the world order to bring in some kind of stability, reduce the geopolitical churn. If something has to be compromised and some innovative system has to be adopted, that must be. Zelensky, as on today, is not the president of, technically and legally speaking, he is not the president. Even if he is not the president, some kind of recognition or identity and an extension of his status unofficially, informally, is being applied for the sake of governance of the Ukraine. Third and most important point is, whatever the case may be, once the the proposal is agreed to, it has to be ratified in the parliament of Ukraine, which I'm sure with the intervention of United States, they definitely would put pressure and make sure that they navigate the complex process of ratification within Ukraine in a meaningful and conclusive manner. And last point is that once it is agreed, the peace proposal, ultimately it will boil down to some give and take. The give and take is a matter of, sitting across the table, talking it out, and bringing some kind of a practical, acceptable solutions to all the relevant stakeholders. But the central point would be, if you allow me to say, is that the current problem of Russia-Ukraine war has to be correctly identified. The current problem is the expansion of NATO, much against the commitment given by James Baker. He was the Secretary of State in one-on-one kind of a dialogue with Mikhail Gorbachev. If I respect my memory, 9th of February 1990, it is etched in golden letters. People must go back, and he had made a commitment, not an inch of expansion of the sphere of influence of NATO would take place to the east of East Germany, not only East Germany, but also the entire Eastern Europe. So therefore, in keeping with that spirit and sense, some kind of a credible decision has to be taken. A security architecture between the Europe and the Central Europe has to be designed and respected and implemented on ground with the help of neutral forces, and that would tantamount that as is, where is basis is the only answer. A line of control has to be identified. Neutral forces under the United Nations have to be enforced. They have to be given due entitlement of power and authority to ensure that the whatever decisions are taken, they are implemented on the ground.
Yes, thank you very much, Major General. We'll come back to you. Please stay with us. Now we stay in this topic. Meanwhile, strong reactions are coming in from Europe over the reported U.S. peace plan for Ukraine. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Ukraine must have a central role in deciding its future, stressing nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. She says European leaders will discuss the U.S. proposal today at the G20 in Johannesburg and again next week at the EU-AU meeting in Angola. Separately, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has spoken with President Trump, saying they agreed on next steps at the advisors level and that he will brief European partners. Meanwhile, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Kyiv's allies will meet on the sidelines of the G20 to examine the U.S. plan and explore ways to secure a full ceasefire. And also, UN Chief Antonio Guterres warns any peace proposal must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, noting the reported plan has not been formally presented. Let's in fact listen into what the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has shared.
For us, as UN, the criteria of any peace plan are always based in the values of the Charter and international law. And so obviously for us, a peace solution for the Ukraine that is in line with these principles would also abide by the resolutions of the General Assembly that have clearly indicated that the territorial integrity of the Ukraine, and in general around the world, the territorial integrity of states must be respected.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Now, you were rightfully mentioned and highlighted in our previous discussion that, the fundamental problem that lies between them must be discussed. So how might these European leaders' insistence on nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine? However, they are open to discussing things without Russia. So nothing about Ukraine without Russia reflects their ideas towards this emerging US-backed peace plan.
Great. I must compliment you, Asoma, again, asking a very brilliant question. But let me tell you one thing, whether with Ukraine or without Ukraine, with Russia or without Russia, this peace proposal, I am mindful of the fact there is a track to backdoor diplomacy which is in progress. This is a product of that backdoor diplomacy wherein all the stakeholders, I am given to understand, all relevant stakeholders have been consulted, and thereafter this conclusive kind of a proposal has been formulated. So therefore, with or without has got no meaning. And as far as the European response is concerned, it's about time that the world needs to tell the European to be practical. This is 21st century. The threat in 20th century to Europe was something different. Yes, it was well understood that Russia had invaded Europe twice, if not more, with the tanks. But in 21st century, all of them will bear me out when I make a statement that the threat in Europe is existential, that the demographic swell and the swap which is taking place is a bigger threat than Putin invading them with tanks on. And Putin, his neck is already, he is doubling down in ensuring that this conflict with Ukraine comes to a favorable, geopolitically acceptable solution as far as he is concerned. He doesn't want, he needs to be understood in the correct perspective. They are unnecessarily tinkering with an idea and provoking Russia so as to maybe they would be resorting to false flag operation to blame Russia and justify their kinetic offensive action against the Russia in time said, but that is not going to give a solution. We are looking for a solution. Third and most important point that you have raised is America is doing a great job for a change. I think they should put all their acts together and gravitate their effort towards the well-identified, well-crystallized end state. The end state is bringing the conflict to an end, no matter what response Europeans give, because the Europeans are losing sight of the fact that way back in 1990, when James Baker and Mikhail Gorbachev were meeting with each other, the Berlin Wall was to be collapsed and both the West and the East Germany were to be merged. And Mikhail Gorbachev had given his unwillingness. And when he was asked as to why is he so consistently unwilling to merge the wall, join both of them, he had expressed his intentions and the fear that he's fearing that the sphere of influence of NATO will continue to expand. And consequent to that, if you recall, Asoma,
Yes.
that the Warsaw Pact members, that the very platform was dissolved with an assurance that NATO is not going to expand. But that time, as against the founding members of 12 in 1949 of NATO, in 1990, the number of members had gone up to 16. And within 4 years, by 1994, they had gone up to 19. And now today, when we are talking and discussing the issue, it has already touched a figure of 32. Where are the commitments and the principles? Therefore, it brings me back to the point of, there is some hidden agenda as far as the NATO forces are concerned. The hidden agenda is to have a greater unilateral or unitary kind of a power to exist from Eastern Europe boundaries right up to Vladivostok. That is not on. This is not going to give any kind of a committed result which the Trump is looking for. So therefore, my sense and my take on the whole issue is that America has started the great project. The peace must be put in place by pragmatic, by give and take, by practical means of finding some lasting solution and bringing peace to this mindless conflict.
100% indeed. Thank you very much for emphasizing and highlighting and sharing that important message with us in NewsX World.